Houston Cougars, a furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Holm Podcast, back here on a Sunday, a rare day for you and I recording podcasts, Bobby. I was thinking about that before we came on, and I want to say the last time we met on a Sunday to record was the emergency episode after they fired Holgerson. There might have been maybe one react that we just did on a Sunday morning just because just time allowed it, or I did it on a Sunday morning. I can't remember, but yeah. It's been a while, buddy. And like, though it's a different kind of occasion, like the Holgerson getting fired emergency podcast, it is a happy occasion for us because we are back to preview the Cougar basketball season at large. Obviously, Kellen Sampson, the men's basketball team, preseason 1 or 2, depending on where you're looking, coming off the best season of our lifetimes in last 7 or 8 years, when it feels like each successive season at times has almost been like, wow, this was like in some way the best season of our lifetimes. Truly an incredible season, even with its difficult finish, and a lot of reasons for optimism, a lot of reasons for something you said, I believe, to consider this kind of a revenge tour for this team that did do so many spectacular things last year and did get so close to the mountaintop. A lot of interesting returning talent, a lot of guys coming in really intriguing schedule, as you're always going to have in the Big 12. We're going to kick around all that. We're going to kick around a Cougar women's basketball team that I think has reasons for optimism in the short and long terms, with Matthew Mitchell now taking over that program, and seemingly, I think, more interest in investment from the athletic department in that program being something better than it's been in recent memory. All stuff we're going to talk about. Always great to talk hoops, Bobby. As much as it's been atypically for the past few years, a really encouraging football season, one that we've enjoyed covering more than most of the recent past seasons. Basketball is something I think we've been looking forward to this basketball season since maybe the initial pain of the finals wore off, which for me, honestly, a week or two into April, by the middle of the month, I was kind of just like, okay, but this is going to be a stacked team next year and still going to be an incredible season. Just really, really, it's been exciting me to come talk to you about hoops, Bobby. This is not that we don't look forward to every episode, but getting to really dive into the men's and women's basketball teams here is something I'm looking forward to, bud. So how you doing? How you feeling in the most general sense about the hoops to come?
Yeah, man, it's got to be tough to cheer for a team that is 6-1 in football and not predicted to win the Big 12. That's got to be tough. I don't know a school that might be going through that today, but at least, we could be not talking about the number 1 or number 2 team in the country, and that would feel a lot worse, especially with my team in football being 6-1. That would be unfortunate, right?
We're timestamping this by doing this too. Like, this is if you're listening closer, the season starts likely on the regular feed here. We recorded this on the 19th of October in anticipation of the season, figuring we were close enough to the season to start, I think, really seriously talking ball, but not so close that we risk not getting this out in time for those of y'all listening and looking to consume any Cougar basketball content before the season starts.
Yeah, I think that was kind of our deal, is we were like, well, someone could get injured, knock on wood that they don't, but at some point you got to put a preview out, and we're a little busy this upcoming weekend. It probably would have been a slightly better time to do it, but God, our co-host emeritus is just so selfish sometimes.
Yeah, just guy decided to get married. Guy cut into what would be my most easy road trip to make. Real bad move by him. In all seriousness, Bobby and I are very excited to be groomsmen in co-host emeritus Dustin's wedding in about a week's time. Chances are already occurred by the time that you're listening to this here podcast. But enough of our little idle chit chat, Bobby. Let's get to the hoops, because we're going to have a lot to talk about between these two teams. Of course, going to lead off with Cougar men's basketball. Another season, another very highly ranked men's hoops team for us to talk about here. No doubt for any Cougar fan listening, the two of us also included in that group, the way last season finished was a heartbreaker. I mean, we've been extremely spoiled here for good basketball teams going on about a decade now. The last time there was an NCAA tournament held where the Cougs didn't make the second weekend was now 7.5 years ago. And but for a crazy buzzer beater in that one, we might have an even longer streak to this point of making fairly deep runs into March Madness, which is just one of those overall things that I really try not to take for granted. I really try not to look past, because there were so many seasons where I think both of us would have given many things just to see U of H play a first four game. Just to, I mean, remember how excited we were in 2010 when that team just kind of went on a crazy, unexpected run in the CUSA
That's exactly
tournament.
what I was about to say, is like, we lost our minds. I remember sitting in a restaurant watching the selection show, just like, where are we going to be? What's our seed going to be? Knowing that, like, at best we were like a 12 seed. Like, it was awesome.
They were about to get fed kind of into the wood chipper against like a top 16-20, which unfortunately was happened against Gravis Vasquez era Maryland that year. That we take, like, none of us should take for granted the consistent excellence of this program. He said it on like an ESPN Plus broadcast last season. This was Reed Geddes, and then I believe Matt Thomas was on the play-by-play of that one, and kind of asked Reed Geddes, hey, compare your era, Phi Slamma Jamma. If you don't know, Reed Geddes was the point guard for those Phi Slamma Jamma teams, with this era you watch now with Kelvin Sampson. And he's like, well, I think we did great things in my era, but I feel like U of H just consistently produces some of the best seasons that we ever had. U of H just does that year in, year out. Like, he's just like, obviously speaking highly of his era, but just like the consistent excellence just is not something we should overlook. And I can understand that the way last season ended still hurts, and it hurts differently than, I mean, I can conceptualize like the NC State shot against U of H and that Final Four 42 years ago now, feeling bad, but it was 5 years before I was born. Like, I can conceptualize it, but it doesn't really hit me in the gut, even if I understand like, hey, how and why this was a painful loss. But we can look forward to the present here at a team that has, I think, an almost unending list of reasons for you, me, and every U of H fan to be optimistic for this season to come. And I mean, Emmanuel Sharp, someone who has consistently improved year on year, he's back. Even if he's only marginally improved from last season, which I don't expect will be the case, I think it'll be much more than marginal improvement. We're still talking about one of the best all-around guards in the college game. Miles Uzan, a first-year revelation at point last season, with just the impossible seeming task of replacing Jamal Shed, a program icon. He's back, which wasn't something you and I took as a given immediately after the conclusion of the season. I'm not just going to list off every player right now, though. I think we'll all get to them organically as we do this preview. So, Bobby, I'm going to pass the metaphorical microphone to you here. Tell me where your head is. Tell me where your head is at. Don't know why that sentence was hard for me to say there, with this Cougar men's basketball program this upcoming season. And yeah, I think after that, we get to talking about, I think, the lineup with this team, which you and I are, spoiler alert, I think, pretty aligned on.
Yeah, man. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is how I'm no longer surprised by the preseason polls. Like, it's not that I expect to be number one or top five. It just no longer feels surreal like it did the first couple of times I saw it. Like, the first time I saw a one by our name was just a crazy feeling that I hadn't seen in any sport that we participated since I became a fan. So it's just very surreal to see that. And it's just not surreal anymore. I see it and I go, yeah, that's about what I expected. Like, it's not that I have an expectation that we should be here all the time, and that now I'm one of those fans that's like, oh no, we should contend every year automatically because we're the University of Houston. I think that's a fool's mindset, and that's what leads schools like Penn State to fire their football coach after 3 bad games. I would say 2 bad games, right? That's what leads you down the road of of firing a coach that's really good and bringing in somebody who may not be as good. So I don't have that expectation. I remember what it was like to follow James Dickey era Cougar basketball, but it's just no longer mind-blowing that it happens. I mean, when Ken Palm ranks your coach as number 1, I wasn't surprised. You know, I heard he had that metric, and I click it and I see Kelvin Sampson's number 1, and you're like, I mean, yeah, who would you put ahead of him right now? Like, maybe Bill Self, maybe, but
I think you made a decent case for Dan Hurley.
Dan Hurley, yeah,
I know they were
Dan
kind of
Hurley.
disappointing last year, but my God, dude, the 2 championship
Yeah.
teams they had
Yeah.
were like the
We're
best
so
team in
good.
the country both seasons.
But it's just like, but then you just look and you're like, oh, it's Houston's coach. Like, yeah,
and it's not a surprise.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, Sampson. Look, if Sampson's in 5th, you kind of go, really? Who's the 4 you got better than him? You know, you kind of just get a little shocked by that. But no, I wasn't surprised. Heading into the season, there's kind of a new experience with this Cougar basketball team, if you really think about it. This is the first time we've had a top rated recruiting class. We've had some good recruits come in, right? You had Jarris Walker. You had Quentin Grimes transfer in from Kansas. He was a great prospect heading in, but a class like the one that we have is just not something we've seen. You pair the recruits with the returning talent that you mentioned of Emmanuel Sharp, JoJo Tugler, Milo Suzan, and it's crazy to think how good this team can be. Like, it's last year you came into the season going, there's a really good shot that this team wins a national title. This year you have those same kind of thoughts, and while looking at the polls and not being shocked that you're number 1 isn't surprising, or not surreal, it is surreal to think that you are got a really good shot and are probably one of the favorites to be in the Final Four, if not national championship games.
I was thinking about pushing back on the never brought in higher level recruits before, because Jarris Walker was in the class with Terrence Arsenault, who's obviously not here now, and maybe didn't live up to 100% of maybe what you wanted for him as a recruit, but that was a top 20 and top 50 recruit. Right. But also, your larger point is correct. Like, those seasons still aren't the norm, and you were kind of like, you still weren't expecting that like, you were expecting Jarris Walker to be probably like a game in, game out starter, which he ended up being for the Cougs, and ended up, like we expected, becoming a lottery pick not that long afterwards. But that was really, you weren't asking as much of that class, because as we'll get to here in a moment, you're probably expecting 2 of these star recruits to come in and be in your starting 5. You're expecting one of the other ones to probably be one of your key rotation guys and back up Milos Uzan and potentially give you something that you didn't have last year in a second point guard option that you feel comfortable with out there, when inevitably, because you don't want to play Milos Uzan 40 minutes a game for an entire season, you want to give this guy a chance to not play out there, a chance to be fresher. And sometimes you had to have a lot of like 37, 38 Milos Uzan minutes kind of games to get where you needed to get to last season. But I mean, to avoid getting ahead of myself, I think having that other point guard option is one of those things I'm really excited about this team having as compared to last year. But that's still, like, you're asking a freshman there to play a pretty critical role. So we've kind of already started talking about it, and I'm kind of glad you initiated kind of you and I saying, okay, like, do we really differ on this so we could kind of approach this differently? You and I pretty much agree on what we expect to be the opening night starting 5. Milos Uzan back at point, obvious. Emmanuel Sharp at shooting guard, obvious. Maybe the least obvious of the 5, though I would still feel a high level of confidence in it. You have Isaiah Harwell being your 3rd guard out there, and then JoJo Tugler at power forward, and Chris Sinak Jr. at center. Have you, in the 15 hours since we connected about this previously, Bobby, have you changed your mind on that being your expected lineup?
No, not anything more than that. I do think that kind of 3rd guard, that small forward, kind of that transition player could be a group of guys. I wouldn't be surprised if you see multiple starters throughout the year. But I think game 1, that's probably going to be what Sampson goes with. But I think that kind of 3rd spot is going to be pretty fluid heading into the season. You can see if we want to play big, we can play big there. If you want to play small, you can kind of play small there. So yeah, I think that is kind of where I'm at, though.
Yeah, and a lot of reasons to be, I think, really excited about the specific guys in this lineup. If I could zoom in on Emmanuel Sharp here, if you'll allow me.
Yeah, I have notes on everybody, so let's go.
Let's do it. Not an especially bold take on my part, but back to Emmanuel Sharp, someone we've already talked about a decent amount. I believe this coming season for him, when it's all said and done, is going to put him from where he is now, where I would say he's among the group of very good guards of the Kelvin Sampson era, to borderline program icon. I think that's the kind of season that we could see from Emmanuel Sharp, because he's been so consistent at taking steps forward over his career. He started out on that team with Jarris Walker and Terrence Arsenault, and then obviously veteran guys like Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shedd. He was your microwave bench score guy on that 22-23 team. I remember one of my earliest impressions of him in one of his first games he took the court was how fearless he looked shooting the ball, even as a new college player. You see guys come into the college game sometimes and look a little tentative. That was, I think, one of my few critiques of Terrence Arsenault's first season. The season later, now 2 seasons ago, I remember when you, me, and Dustin talked about it, we weren't sure whether it was going to be him or Terrence Arsenault. That it was kind of in the Isaiah Harwell spot that you just mentioned, though I think with a lot more uncertainty there. And it looked like Arsenault might have won that until he had that terrible early injury in the A&M game in Houston. Sharp ended up grabbing that starter's job and then just not letting go over the course of his career. Last season takes another step forward, despite his usage rates basically staying the same or increasing across the board, became a notably more efficient scorer. I think him and LJ Cryer, two heads of one of the best 3-point shooting offenses in the country. And I don't think, Bobby, that's a complete list of things you could be excited about when it comes to Emmanuel Sharp. But like, I wanted to just restate for the two of us and everyone listening how much this guy has already done in his career in a program where I think not unfair to, I think, expect even more improvement from the guy this season.
Yeah, man. When it comes to Emmanuel Sharp, I think sadly, the lasting image that a lot of us have and a lot of national media has of Emmanuel Sharp is that final play in the national championship game. Tough break for him there, but I think that is going to bring us to a 2025-2026 Emmanuel Sharp revenge tour. I think, like you said, just fearless shooting the ball. I think if you gave him a truth serum here, and he was 100% honest with you, he would have told you, I need to throw that shot up even if it gets blocked. So I think one of the good things that Kelvin Sampson does is when a guy has a moment like that, he doesn't absolutely tear the guy down, and he makes sure that they know how important they are to the team. And to your point, Emmanuel Sharp's going to be super critical to this team. A guy who is just a pure Kelvin Sampson guy, plays defense when he needs to lock down. Emmanuel Sharp can be one of the best defenders on the court. And you see that from him. The thing I'd like to see just a little bit more is his ability to drive to the basket and get to the hole. I think he has some of that, but I think when I think of Emmanuel Sharp, I think of a guy who from beyond the arc can really make plays out there, can create his own shot. I think he does a good job of that. And also a great spot up shooter. You can put him in the corner. You can put him at the top of the key, and he's going to just drain those. I would love to see, that's kind of the next thing I would love to see from Emmanuel Sharp, is his ability to get to the hole, just get better, right? When I talk about creating your own shot, he does a really good job of freeing himself up with step backs, things like that for his 3-point shot. Getting to the basket is going to be that thing that can take this offense to the next level, in my opinion.
I would agree. He's already coming in as one of your most reliable free throw shooters. You'd like him to become even more of a presence. I think he took a step forward there last year, though I don't think that was one of the strengths of his game. I think if he can add that to continuing to be a dead-eye 3-point shooter, and obviously his teammates around him doing what they need to do to take the pressure off him, so your opponents can't just set up their defense to deny Emmanuel Sharp 3-point looks. That's what I think made last year's team so dangerous from deep, is that you often had him and Cryer on the floor at the same time, and those guys command so much respect there that it's not necessarily an easy task to set up a defense for it. Milos Uzan coming back is really exciting, because I think one of the most difficult things that you can be in all sports as a first-year point guard under Kelvin Sampson. You know what I mean? Like he has that
Oh,
famous
100%.
quote about like I think it's two people that can't have a bad practice. It's the head coach and the point guard. I believe.
Yep.
Maybe I don't know if I'm getting him verbatim on that, but I think that's like the crux.
I think that feels right to me.
Oh no, it's three. It's the head coach, the team's best player, and the point
That's
guard.
it. Yep.
It was. I was like, I knew it was three in my head, but so I mean that's a high bar to clear, and I remember looking at it, and it did help that he had been in college for 2 years with a coach in Porter Moser, who I think is pretty well respected in Oklahoma. But I mean, I still think like going from anyone to Kelvin Sampson, even if you aren't new to being in a Division I men's basketball program, can be kind of a shock. Like you hear the successful transfer guys still say that after, being in the program for a bit. And to do what he did, which isn't to say that every single game he was perfect, but to be one of the lowest turnover guys, a legit scoring option, another elite 3-point shooter. I don't want to, he wasn't obviously shooting nearly as often from deep as the likes of Cryer and Sharp last year, but a guy you legitimately have to respect to do that. I remember when the Cougs had that come from behind win in Arizona, the way he at times almost just willed the team. Like he wasn't the only guy responsible for it, but I don't believe anyone was more responsible on that day in Tucson for UH coming back and getting a really nice resume win, a win that put you in the inside track to ultimately win the conference for a second straight year. That he was that critical to you in year one, I think should excite all of us for what this guy has in store in year two. Like he doesn't look exactly like what Jamal Shed did at the point guard position. Like that was one thing. Like Jamal Shed looked a bit more like a true point guard than Uzan, who I think was involved in the offense a little bit more than you'd expect from a true point guard, was creating his own shot a little bit more often, maybe like a bit lower raw assist numbers. But I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. Like last year's team was an extremely good offensive team, and he played a big part in that. And I think we'll play an even bigger part in it this year.
Yeah, I think the Uzan part, like you said, I think one of the things you said really kind of resonates with me is that less of a true point guard than Marcus Sasser probably was, but I would say Uzan, when he came over, the way he's developed has been insane. When he came over, I don't think any of us were like, oh man, I'm so excited to get this guy. It was kind of like, yeah, he's looked all right at times. I mean, I can kind of see what we're trying to accomplish with this. I bet it'll be pretty good, And then he came over and he's a real success on the Sampson development project. I think when you brought him over, he wasn't getting any NBA kind of hype. I don't think if he stays on that Oklahoma team that he gets nearly the NBA hype that he got this year. For me, I never really thought that he was going to the NBA despite him joining the draft process. I didn't think he'd be a first rounder, and that's not a shot at Milos. That's just there's only so many first rounders that you can have. But what you saw was just amazing from him. You absolutely had a dominant point guard in a way that you hadn't that played in a different way than any of the point guards you had before. So yeah, I think he went and got his draft analysis, and you're going to see that he needs to be an even better scorer. I think at times a better passer, just get slightly better at everything. And I think you're going to see that because he wants to live out that NBA dream. So I think he got some really good feedback in the draft process. And I think what we're going to see from him is kind of more of that being a true point guard that we kind of discussed.
Yeah, some reminder in the season. I mean, I remember his Oklahoma numbers. It was one of those like was asked to shoot it probably a lot more than you would want him to, and wasn't super efficient at doing it. And before the season, one of my thoughts was, maybe because knowing he was going to be in an offense with Cryer and Sharp, it's like, all right, like this guy's not going to be asked to be more than the third offensive choice. And frankly, with Wani, probably the fourth, although I think he ended up being a lot closer to the third when it was all said and done for the season. If this guy's not asked to be a high usage offensive guy, and it was hard to look at the team last season and think, oh yeah, we're going to start like taking away shots from Sharp and Cryer to give him to this new point guard who's never been a good shooter. But like, if he can be not the first option and have those guys take pressure off him, I thought I thought he could potentially be a pretty good shooter. I didn't think he would be top 70 in the country good
Yeah,
at
me
shooting.
neither.
He shot just a hair to
Exactly.
43% last year. At, averaging about 3 or 4 attempts per game. Like, that's still going to be very valuable. And I think if anything, without LJ Cryer on this team, it becomes even more valuable. Like, can Miles Uzan continue that? Maybe be asked to do a bit more offensively and still be good enough there to take pressure off guys. So again, this doesn't become every team that plays you just loading up to solve Emmanuel Sharp from deep. That you have other guys that could conceivably do it, which I think this team does have. But that's going to be something you ask Uzan to maybe become a more of an efficient 2-point shooter as well. But I don't know. Like, I still think he could give you something that looks a lot like his 24-25 season here. And I think still, I mean, because again, worth reiterating, what he gave you last year was point guard on a team that lost narrowly in the national finals. So even if Milos Uzan doesn't improve noticeably, though guys pretty consistently do that in this program, we're still talking about a pretty good player here. And you almost kind of take it as a given in this program that guys like him are going to consistently improve year on year.
Yep.
I was going to say, I know if we were going kind of in order on the players, we'd probably talk about Isaiah Harwell next. Can I skip to the third and final returning starter of this group?
Yeah, let's go.
JoJo Tugler, a guy who, other than the 2 freshmen that we're going to probably talk about here momentarily, and this is not me discounting Miles Uzan, to me, JoJo Tugler feels like, and it's hard to call a guy a sleeper when he's about like the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year and is just widely regarded as one of the sport's most elite defense and rebounding big man. To call him a sleeper, I realize at the top that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think sleeper possible first round pick from this team. Like, people,
I saw him getting some hype for first round.
Yeah,
by some folks last year.
Yeah, I don't see him as the same level of prospect. I think just because the draft always prioritizes getting guys right at that point where they turn like 19 or so, like kind of skewed towards those one and done type prospects. Even teams will probably admit might not be immediately ready to contribute in a lot of cases. I think Harwell and Sinak are obviously, Sinak probably chief among those two, pretty likely to hear their name called within the first round, maybe even the first 20 picks or so of next summer's draft. I think Tugler could be kind of late first roundy in the way that Marcus Sasser was. And it's not hard to look at him and see why, even if the offensive game at this point in his career, there's still some kind of like looking at him and it's like, okay, like this will improve, or like, hey, it's a little raw right now, but look at all these other tools. Like, he's very young for his grade. Like, I realize he's gonna be a junior, so still not on the young end of like draft prospects, but probably on the youngest end of like third year college players out there. Yeah, just look, I would say his Ken Palm. He's just turned 20 this year. So we're still talking about a guy who like developmentally has a lot of good basketball in him. You asked him from his freshman season to last year not to be a huge part of the offense. Like, he was still more nights than not your 5th out of 5 option when he was on the floor there for you. Not that he didn't have as good offensive games, but like, you asked him to do more offensively, and he was actually like sometimes capable of it. And I think that can get better, because I still think his sophomore year in that way was a step forward from his freshman year. And that if you see another step forward to a guy who's already one of the best offensive rebounders and all-around rebounders in the country, and already maybe the best returning shot blocker in the entire country, just like a defensive menace, like a wingspan terror to anyone that's going to be on the U of H schedule. I think you can't look at him as easily with his offensive game and talk about the things you and I just talked about with Uzan and Sharp. But, oh man, like, if the offense takes even like somewhat of a step forward with the things you could already kind of pencil in he's going to give you, like, that to me is a reason to be really bullish or really optimistic about this Cougar men's basketball team that I don't see. I'm not saying I don't ever see it stated. Like, people know JoJo Tugler and people in this fan base like him, but I don't see that stated as a reason for optimism as often as I think it should be. Like, that's something that's going to be really difficult to deal with if you're a team that has U of H on the schedule, is just the presence of JoJo Tugler, even if he is still in some areas kind of a project. In some areas, he is maybe the best at what he does in the country.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument that he is the best defensive player in the country, and I think this year on his, I think this past season you saw that offensive game really take a step forward. You kind of mentioned it, and not to like call you out, I feel like you underplayed how good of a jump he made in the past year. His freshman year, that he didn't see the court as much as you probably would think for a guy with his build and the way Sampson likes to play, because he was kind of a liability on the offensive side. This year, he was good enough where you could run some plays through him. He did good passing, or made some good passes. I saw him getting some major NBA hype for his defensive efforts last year. I saw a couple of people kind of snuck him into like top 35 prospects because of that, because of his defense. His offense, like I said, improved a lot last year. If JoJo takes a step forward, to your point, Bud, if he takes a step forward offensively, it's going to be a problem for the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to have issues figuring out what to do with JoJo Tugler if he is even better than he was offensively last year.
And to kind of expand on this, I think the prospect of him and Chris Sinak in the front court, like obviously with Sinak, you're expecting some of the freshman growing pains. Like I'm expecting there were going to be games where he gets into foul trouble early, just because, again, like even as a truly elite prep prospect, like you still haven't gone against grown ass men the way you're going to go against grown ass men. Like I fully acknowledge he played, I think, the best of the best that you can play in his position. Even like the big man for Ryder. I just remember that from one of our like November body bag games, because before the Vegas thing. The big man he plays against on Ryder is still going to be probably a talented, tougher dude than just about anyone he saw on even like the high end prep circuit. Just from probably playing a guy who's been in college basketball for 3 or 4 years. So I think we should all kind of bake that expectation in to what you see. Like if you see Chris Sinak do something, because we were very spoiled for having Jaywan Roberts. Like this guy obviously is a lot more talented than Jaywan Roberts. So I think he'll never, just by virtue of being a one and done level prospect, will never have the impact that Jaywan had on this program. But obviously a much more talented guy out of the box. But you learn some things in several years of playing college basketball, and Chris Sinek's going to have to learn a lot quickly. It's going to be, even for an elite recruit like him, kind of a fire hose situation, like dealing with the college game. But I think to my original kind of meandering point here, do the shot blocking and rebounding, like if you can make Tugler and Sinak work together on the floor at the same time, and I don't understand anyone who would say would have seen this staff work these last 10 or so years and would say that, hey, Kelvin Sampson, UH can't figure that out. Like there might be some growing pains there, but also like good luck scoring in like inside of like 10 feet of the basket if U of H can get those two guys working together, sooner than later.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem for, like I said, for some Big 12 offenses. JoJo Tugler and Chris Sinak being on the same court is going to cause some issues. And if you have and we'll talk about Sinak here in a minute, but if you have his offensive ability and Tugler's ability to, he can take the next level with his passing and his turnaround game. Buddy, there's a reason why you're kind of ranked number 2 in the AP and number 1 in KenPom.
Let me throw these numbers at you. So we're expecting that to be your starting front court. JoJo Tugler, 6'8", 7'6" wingspan. Chris Sinak Jr., 6'11", 7'3" wingspan. Like that's one of those things you hear about this program prioritizing, and not that like, okay, yeah, like it makes sense. Guys with long arms who are bought in on doing all the hard stuff that Cougar basketball players are asked to do. Like it stands to reason they would be pretty good, but like the actual results have just been absolutely insane. Again, just like good luck scoring against these guys. Even again, acknowledging that there's going to be a game at some point, probably even against an opponent that we're not expecting to be fairly close. And the game might not be that close ultimately, but Sinak plays like 9 minutes because he commits like 3 fouls or just does something that like causes Kelvin to like yank his arm towards the bench, and instead we see like Khalifa Sacco this game for 25 minutes and Kelvin saying something catty about Sinak's performance. Like it's coming. And
It's going to happen.
And it's fine. Like it is totally
and
fine.
Honestly, if it doesn't, then this team is even more dangerous than we think it is.
Yeah, if it doesn't happen, this guy is getting called his name called in the single digits. I feel like, which might happen regardless.
Right.
In next summer's draft.
Yep.
Only guy we haven't talked about, Isaiah Harwell, from this starting five. Like, I would say obviously he's still a headline guy in this class, but I would say for the vast majority, if not nearly all of Division I men's basketball teams, like Isaiah Harwell is the like headline signee, and is only because you have a truly elite instead of just like regular elite signee coming in, and Chris Sinak is the reason why Isaiah Harwell hasn't led even more in our discussions here. Guy who I think a good job evaluating by the staff. Not that there were any program, not that Isaiah Harwell had a shortage of interest from colleges to play ball, but he talked about, I remember after the commitment and eventual signing, that how the U of H staff communicated with him after he suffered a pretty significant, I want to say an ACL injury during his ACL in his prep career, really kind of helped cement U of H as the team he wanted to play going forward. And I think it speaks to how good like the development and strength and conditioning run by Alan Bishop has been, that you and I have this rock solid confidence that this guy who very, very prominently had a significant injury in his high school career, that the staff's going to handle him right, and he's going to be able to come in here and immediately be an impact guy like that. And on a lower scale, because Emmanuel Sharp was a good recruit, but obviously not an Isaiah Harwell level recruit, we saw Emmanuel Sharp come into this program off of a significant, he had a significant injury. I want to say it was like the fall semester of his senior year, and ended up just graduating early and rehabbing and enrolling at U of H. And that guy came out of the box immediately, like ready to be a bench contributor his first full season in college. So I think that's a really underrated part of this as well. But guy who's a scorer, like Isaiah Harwell's not going to play point for you, but something I really saw a lot when I was reading the various evals. Like obviously I haven't watched like 10 hours of his Pocatello high school highlights, or he played for he's from Pocatello, but he played for
Right.
Wasatch, which is it's a big prep school in this part of the country out here. I haven't watched like 10 hours of his Wasatch tape, but a lot of raving about his defensive abilities. And you would kind of assume that's a prerequisite for high level guys. Like obviously the staff's got to kick the tires on the high level prospects to show interest, but you would expect even a high end guy, the staff's not going to take him if there's any significant questions when it comes to motor, when it comes to effort, when it comes to being bought in both offensively and defensively. And everything I've seen from there is rave reviews. Ability to score close to the basket. I think a perimeter ability like you'd expect a shooting guard to have, but I think the thing that got me most excited, though, obviously doing this against closer to grown men in college will be different than prep ball or high school basketball, is going to be like his offensive game inside of the arc, his ability to create in the mid range, drive to the basket, that kind of stuff. How quickly can we see this guy do it? And if we could see it pretty quickly, oh buddy, like if he can as a freshman unlock some of that stuff, it takes so much pressure off the perimeter. It allows you, if you could put it this way, if you have someone out there who can do just about anything offensively, like, hey, we've got these two dead-eye shooters, we've got these two guys who can slash the basket, we've got at least one big man out there capable of getting the ball in the low block and finding a way to either draw the foul or put the ball in the basket, it makes you an incredibly hard proposition to defend. That was last year's team I kind of just described, other than I think the slash into the basket, even though Uzan and Sharp gave you that periodically. If you can add maybe a bit more of that slashing ability, either from Uzan, Sharp improving, and Harwell coming in here, I think it makes it a tough customer. And I think I've talked enough. Bobby, what are your thoughts on Isaiah Harwell?
Yeah, for Isaiah Harwell, like I said, I think this is definitely the part of the roster where there's going to be a little bit of play. I don't think you're going to see Harwell start every game. I think you're going to see a little bit of a mix of some guys, somebody coming off the bench, or this really feels like one of those situations where the starter starts, but they play 25 minutes and then somebody else gets 15, kind of a situation where they're almost splitting it 50-50, or it goes like 22-18, something like that. So I think Harwell will be the primary starter, though. Like you said a lot there. He's a big time recruit. He's an absolute bucket getter. I didn't spend, like you said, hundreds of hours running over his tape, which was actually limited because of that injury. Was a big thing I saw in a lot of his reports, people that had on it. But he's an absolute bucket getter with his jumper. Where they say he struggles a little bit. Again, I watched some of his tape, but I don't break down basketball tape, right? When it comes to basketball, I'm very much the vibes guy, as I am wont to be at times, is the guy who can kind of go, I know I like the way that looks, right? Physically, they said he developed pretty quick, right? He was physically kind of ahead of a lot of the people in his class, and he had that ACL injury, and that ACL injury kind of hampered that a little bit. Like you said, great communication from the staff. The staff was not in a situation where they were like, nope, we're not interested in you anymore. Just leave us alone after he tore his ACL. Played a huge role there for him. Like I said, limited tape just because of that, but still a massive get, and a guy who you can kind of use, even though he's not with the program anymore, kind of like a Terrence Arsenault, just a better Terrence Arsenault in terms of how he's going to get used. A guy who can come in, get you a bucket, and will just find he's just going to add to an offense that I think if you had to choose one of the two sides that you would like to see U of H get improved on, it's always going to be the offense under Kelvin Sampson. So this kind of feels like you're going to let Milos take that LJ Crier position, kind of go to the next level with that. Sharp keeps playing how he does, and then Harwell is just kind of that third guy who can kind of spread the floor for you, free up for hopefully some Sinek and Tugler inside, and you're hoping Harwell can get some open shots.
Wouldn't call him a true small forward or wing, but he would be the closest thing you've had to that position. It's been mostly, like, in the recent memory, like three guards. And I would still say this is probably like this likely starting 3 guard-ish guys we're expecting. Sharp, Uzan and Harwell here. But closest thing you've had to like a true wing, small forward kind of guy in the position in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% I agree.
Let me ask you a off-the-cuff question, if you don't mind.
Oh, God, here we go. All right, no.
Over or under 3.5 different starting lineups in the regular season from Kelvin Sampson?
3 feels like it's probably the answer. And this is barring injuries, that kind of stuff. I'm going to go with 3. And when you do this, how do I say this? You are certainly looking for... You're assuming that the recruits come in and kind of play like you think they're going to play. You assume no injuries. I'm still going to go under 3.5. 3 to 4 feels, I think you set the line really well. I think it's going to depend a lot on just the kind of experimenting that he wants to do. And I think Sampson will do some experimenting for sure, but I don't know if it's going to be like his, if you're going to see it too much this year.
Yeah, I think 3 is about that number. I knew I should have set the number there at 2.5, because I would say under that, but I would also, if I had put a number to it, 3. So we'll get to the bench here, and I'll ask you again another off the cuff question, but one you won't have a problem answering here. So
okay.
let's say the collective predictive starting 5 that you and I have now mentioned a few times, Sharp, Uzan, Harwell, Tugler, and Sinek. Let's say it doesn't happen. Who's the starter that you think we missed on, and why?
Oh, it's going to be in that third spot, right? Let me, oh, man, I thought about this, but I think you're going to see some Kingston Flemings. I could see him kind of coming in somewhere along the lines. Um, but I think the one that really kind of stands out to me is going to be like a Jacob McFarland. If you want a little bit of something with your height, maybe you you don't like JoJo playing a certain height. And if they go really big, McFarland 6'11", you can kind of combat that. I also think you could see Khalifa Sacco kind of jump in here at some point as well. Maybe instead of Sinak, you're going to see Sacco because you kind of want the experience, something like that. But those would kind of be my answers. Who you got?
Even though this guy's role seems ideally suited to being a first off the bench, maybe higher usage sometimes kind of guard, I'm going to say Mercy Miller.
Yeah,
That's the one guy I think could be maybe overlooking as a start of the season.
Yeah, not a disagreement for me there at all.
Because we'd heard maybe not entirely sourced, but close enough to the program that we at least kept an eye on it. Whispers that Miller and U of H would go their separate ways after the season, and he stuck around. And from everything I've seen and all the preseason content I've consumed so far, it sounds like most guards of this program historically, he took a big step forward this offseason. I mean, again, because it tracks. Most freshmen don't come into this program as difference makers. Like Jarris Walker is the outlier there. Even program greats like Jamal Shed, Marcus Sasser, Wani Roberts were not great their first season in the program. I mean, Shed was one of the least used, maybe the least used player on that 2021 Final Four team. And Sampson always loved telling that story about when he was having his final season, he was this program icon, all-American, all everything point guard. Delighted, I think, in telling assembled media that this guy was so bad he couldn't play him as a freshman. Sasser definitely played more his freshman season. I remember you and I actually in 2020 saw him nearly single-handedly carry U of H to a win at SMU, but he was still kind of an inconsistent bench score kind of guy. Roberts redshirted. I think everyone gets the point here. Most of the guys who stick around for a second season of this program see big noticeable performance jumps in that second season, and I don't think Miller will be any exception. I still think the most likely outcome here is he's going to be your go-to scorer from the bench group, and I think you're going to kind of see your lead bench guards be Miller, Kingston Flemings, you mentioned, Ramon Walker Jr., but we'll also see, I think, plenty of mixed lineups where Miller's out there with Sharp and Uzan as well. Like tons of intriguing combinations out there, I think, involving Mercy. And the great thing is, even if my your predicted lineup is wrong, and let's say it's Miller starting game one in that third guard spot instead of Harwell, that, if anything, gives more credence to the talk we've kind of seen that, hey, this guy has really stepped his game up in his second season now in the program. There's no realistic possible starting five combo for me where all the expected key guys are healthy that would concern me, which I think is a real luxury that comes with having the kind of roster or preseason top two team like the Cougs have.
Yeah, I agree.
Zoom in more on the bench of this team. There have been a number of preseasons, especially in the more recent ones, where the two of us or Dustin and I or Yumi and Dustin kind of halfway talked ourselves into there being this 5 or 6 man bench rotation. I think we have enough data now to say that Kelvin Sampson is not going to run this thing with a rotation that's more than 9 or 10 guys if this game is even a bit close. Could shrink down even to 8. We see that sometimes for the bigger postseason games that Kelvin Sampson goes with a bit tighter of a rotation, a bit smaller bench. And we've often seen Sampson's willingness to go to certain bench guys, again, like in some high level moments for extended minutes, but also he's pretty steady with his starting five. Like, you might see a change or two over the course of the season, but even if like the raw minutes played by the starters aren't a ton, like it's a pretty reliable starting five. It is notable when there's a change there, and usually you could kind of say largely the same thing about this bench. Someone I'm really excited about that we've only talked a little bit about is Ramon Walker Jr. if he's healthy, and all indications are he is after missing nearly all of last season. Having him back as the tone setter guy off the bench as he's been for basically every season he's been healthy, it's hard not to see him being one of your first few guys off the bench most nights for this team. And it's difficult to talk about him and not sound a little cliched, that he does things that the box score doesn't usually measure. Or I think what Samson said in the past, that if I'm choosing 5 guys I want to win a basketball game with, Ramon is my first pick. Or I'm not quoting him verbatim on that, but something he said a few times. But all those cliches are true. He's almost certainly not going to be a double-digit scorer. He's almost certainly not going to shoot gaudy percentages from the field. He's going to play tough defense. He's going to rebound much better than your average college guard. And if he's physically right, can give you the occasional corner three, the occasional slash to the hoop, or the dive for a ball that tips back to one of your big men and keeps the possession going, as U of H is one to do with offensive rebounding. I'm really excited to add him back, and if he's healthy, kind of give you what Malik Wilson gave you in last year's team, which is one of those was low-key really important things that it's easy to kind of forget now. But I remember week in, week out, how often you and I were on here, Bobby, being like, man, Malik made this big player. Man, Malik gave you some really valuable minutes in this spot. I think and I hope that Ramon Walker Jr. can be that guy on this year's team.
Yeah, I think that's a great analysis on Ramon Walker and kind of what you're looking for. When I was looking at the bench, I brought up somebody you brought as a possible starting lineup, Mercy Miller. You have a guy who I could argue would be on the starting 5 of a lot of power conference teams in this in Mercy Miller. So I think that's I think having him come off the bench is going to be massive for the team. Another name that I just kind of briefly mentioned as a possible starter, but I think is going to play more of a role coming off the bench, and that's going to be Khalifa Sacco. Khalifa Sacco, coming over from Sam Houston State, brings in a lot of size, brings in a lot of experience. He kind of did a cool thing and donated some, I believe it was him who donated some money to Sam Houston. I don't know why I am.
No, it was another Sam. It was a Sam Houston guy who is playing now at Indiana.
That's it. Yeah. But Khalifa, we've heard some good things coming out of camp about him. We've heard multiple people mention multiple times, like, hey, here's a guy to kind of look out for heading into the season. I think he's going to be a great minutes eater whenever, inevitably, we know how JoJo Tugler likes to get in foul trouble. You're hoping he doesn't do that as much as he did last year. You're going to bring somebody in like a Jacob McFarland or a Khalifa Sacco. And to your point, the bench isn't going to be super deep, but it'll be interesting to watch McFarland and Sacco kind of come in. And again, the things that have plagued this team are injuries. We've seen that multiple times, and also foul trouble. That's just the way our defense is going to play, where we are going to get into foul trouble, and we can get as mad as we want to. We can blame the refs all that we want to, but at the end of the day, that's just kind of how the Cougars play. That's how the Cougars play, and that's what it is. So anytime you can bring in depth, you didn't need to bring in a ton of new starters or anything like that, but I think Khalifa Sacco also gives you the benefit of, maybe if the freshman Sinek doesn't quite perform how you want, you have somebody like Sacco who is going to be able to step in, have the experience, and play in some of those big games for you.
Yeah, Sacco's a super senior. Most recently played at Sam Houston, averaged about 7.5 and just over 6 rebounds per game. Was top 100 nationally in block percentage and effective field goal percentage and true shooting. As you would expect for any transfer coming into this program, he was Sam Houston's best rebounder by a wide margin. I don't give his super efficient offensive numbers as much weight because he did on about 5 shots per game and will be generally facing a higher level of opponent at U of H, though. I mean, we'll say Conference USA is probably a better mid-major league than most of us out there realize. You have Said Lot as well. Like, he's kind of been in the periphery in terms of guys getting on the court, but has been in the Cougar program a few seasons now. Featured a bit more than you expected 2 seasons ago as a redshirt freshman down the stretch after JoJo Tugler had that season-ending foot injury. But he hasn't yet shown, Lot, in a season that he's ready to be a full-fledged rotation guy. I mean, in flashes, usually in garbage time, the size and rebounding ability are so intriguing. And the fact that he's still in this program tells you that there's at least some belief from Samson, the staff, that he could still come good. But yeah, I expect he'll be fighting with Sacco for those backup 5 minutes. And I would bet there's a decent amount of like still competition still to be had between Sacco and Lott, I believe, over the early part of the season, because you're going to have that dreaded game where Sanak gets in foul trouble early, and you have a bit more leeway with some of these early opponents, accepting obviously Auburn, accepting the Players Era week, to experiment with things, maybe more than you will come Big 12 play at the start of the new year. Kingston Fleming, someone you also mentioned, we haven't really talked about as much. Really, really, really intriguing player as your point guard number 2. Wasn't a consensus 5-star recruit like Sanak and Harwell, but that's about the only thing you can't say about his prep basketball recruiting pedigree. 247 had him as the number 20 player in the 2025 class, and 247 was low on Fleming's as compared to the other services. I believe he was an ESPN 5-star, was also the number 1 rated player in the state of Texas, and the number 3 point guard, also per 247 in his graduating class. I mean, a truly high-end blue chip recruit by any definition, and the only reason he isn't getting even higher billing in this preview is that there are even more elite recruits who are more likely to start in this same class. Speaks to what you said at the start about what a unbelievable positive outlier this class has been, at least in terms of what the recruiting services think about it. And it really does seem like, I mean, the perfect developmental situation for a high-end recruit like Fleming's, who also isn't maybe as obvious of a one and done level prospect like Harwell and Sanak are, that he could be a 2 and done or 3 and done kind of guy. He gets to this season play behind Miles Uzan, an established veteran point guard. And unlike last season, something I said earlier, the really exciting thing about this year's team is you're not going to be in a world of hurt whenever Uzan gets into foul trouble and just can't be on the court for all 40 minutes of this game, or God forbid the game goes to OT, as it does sometimes. That's going to happen. And I think Fleming's allows you to have something you didn't have on last year's team, an incredible team though it was. You had to kind of patch things together last year when Uzan wasn't on the floor. And I don't know if last year's team totally solved for who would run the point when Uzan was on the bench. I mean, you saw Malik Wilson at times, LJ Cryer at times, other guys kind of square peg in a round hole with it. And of course, last year's team was so good that this lack of a second point guard didn't keep them from almost winning the whole damn thing. But this is one area where I believe this team will be better. Not that Fleming's will be perfect as a freshman. I believe the only thing that's harder than being a first-year point guard, I feel like for Kelvin Sampson, is being a first-year point guard who has no prior college experience. Like, that's even a guy like that who's clearly been evaluated for fit in this program. That's going to be tough. I still think even tempering your expectations on what this guy could be this season, he still gives you so much more than anyone else who tried to play point guard for you that wasn't Miles Uzan last season. And that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with that wholeheartedly.
For the rest of the roster, we haven't talked much about Cordell Jefferson, Bryce Jackson, Jacob McFarland, Chase McCarty. You mentioned McFarland earlier. Do you think he's the guy who has the best chance to play out of that group of 4 I just mentioned, or think someone else?
I think he absolutely is. I think you kind of look at some of his pedigree as well. It's coming off the injury, I believe. I'm not losing my mind. Yeah, coming off the injury. I think he I don't know. I kind of like what he does. He was top 100 recruit. You look at some of his other offers, and it just seems like he is the kind of guy that you are going to see kind of come in and give you something a little bit different for than what you're going to see from maybe like a JoJo Tuggle or something like that. I think he can give you some size.
Brief Jacob McFarland. I'm going to time myself. We were at like 58-22 in the recording. I'm going to 59-22-ish stop this. When Jacob McFarland committed to the Cougars, Wyoming was one of the finalists for him. You might remember this.
Yep.
And there was a Wyoming guy on the site formerly known as Twitter who is just like, I'm never there to crap on someone's parade if they think they're getting a recruit, even if I believe U of H is the team to get there. But he was just like, he was chirping me about how, oh yeah, well, Wyoming had, and it was, I swear to God, Bobby, it was like a World War II era, like basketball thing. And I was just like,
I
have no desire to crap on Wyoming, but like, brother, I don't think Jacob McFarland is considering what the 1942 NIT champions or whatever it was as part of his decision matrix. All right.
I absolutely remember that going down too.
Okay, cool. I got that in under a minute. Actual basketball stuff here. If I had to pick from that group, I would say probably the safest for me is Chase McCarty. Even acknowledging that in the last week since we recorded this podcast, Kelvin was specifically pretty tough on McCarty in the public domain. I believe it was about his rebounding. But also, I think Kelvin being tough on a Cougar player in the public domain might be a positive indicator for that player's long-term trajectory, because he's been tough in the public domain on a lot of the very best players in this program's history. You basically named the great player from this era of Cougar basketball, and you can find no shortage, I'm sure, of quotes about what that player doesn't do well enough, or something Kelvin did that he didn't like that he hasn't forgotten on the basketball court. But I mean, I think the main reason I'm saying McCarty is it's a bet on him as a former national top 100 talent, a bet on something we've already talked about in this preview, the consistency at which guys have improved from year 1 to year 2 in this program. And it's too early to say exactly what I believe McCarty's role looks like, but I believe we'll see him as part of the rotation when the season starts. TBD for me, whether that lasts into Big 12 play, whether he's able to get into the 9, maybe sometimes 10 guys we see in the regular rotation, but I think we will see a decent amount of him early. I mean, with Jacob McFarland, like a lot of what you said there, like his size, I think the poor guy just needs a run of staying healthy. I mean, Cordell Jefferson's still in this program, which tells you the staff likes him and likes what he brings on a daily basis, but he hasn't broken into playing regularly in the previous 2 seasons. Just wondering how this one will specifically be different, though we'll be glad to be proven wrong if he is. And Bryce Jackson's a guy I actually really like long-term, in the same way that Chase McCarty was going into last season. Feels like a redshirt candidate, but I think he was underrated at 3 stars. I believe if he had been healthy his entire high school career, we would have been talking a guy who was a lot closer to the top 100 and one of the very best players in Texas than Bryce Jackson ended up being, but seems like a good candidate to redshirt out of that group.
Yeah, totally agree there.
Any more stuff on the roster, the rotation before we zoom out and talk about some other Cougar season stuff, Bobby?
No, let's go.
So where would you like to go next? I admit I don't have our little run sheet that we agreed on in front of us, and I've got some schedule talk, but I didn't want to potentially jump anything that you might have had in your notes that I might have in a different order.
No, I think I have note calendar and schedule next, and
cool.
Then poll stuff and kind of final thoughts.
Perfect.
Excellent.
So we're not going to go line by line through the season schedule, much as we are very excited for the prospect of most weeks from early November through March featuring Cougar men's basketball playing in some form or fashion. But we're going to answer 3 questions about the coming regular season schedule and kind of use that as our jumping off point to talk about that. We'll lead off with the one that's closest in terms of time between when it's going to happen and when you and I sit here and record this preview. Bobby, which non-conference game do you believe is going to tell us the most about this year's team?
There were a couple of games that kind of caught your attention, right? Auburn, you have the Tennessee game, you have Arkansas, and I'm going to go with Tennessee there. I think Tennessee it's at a neutral site. It's the Players Era tournament, so that kind of evens it out a little bit. When you really sit and think, that's going to be probably with the teams that are attending that Players Era tournament. Is going to be probably the closest thing to an NCAA tournament kind of feel and vibe that you're going to be able to get. You're going to play this as the second game. I think with it being at that tournament, you're going to get that NCAA kind of feel. It's the second game, like I said, that you are going to be playing in Vegas. So that one to me really feels like a game that's going to tell you a lot. It's going to tell you that's definitely going to be a game that Sampson is going to have circled and want to make sure that we play and look good in that game. So I would kind of chalk it up to that one being the most important. Arkansas is a great answer, but seeing Tennessee first, I think seeing Tennessee first kind of leans me towards Tennessee, right? It very much is a situation where if Arkansas was being played first, I think I'd learn more about the Arkansas game, but I think we're going to have a good idea of what this team is after that Tennessee game. So that's kind of why I went with that. You do have the Auburn game that you are playing in, but the whole thing with that, with Bruce Pearl retiring, you don't really know what that team's going to be. You still think it's going to be pretty good, but it's not going to be a Bruce Pearl coach team. He kind of leaves really, really late. Kind of a weird situation there. So I think more for me, the one that I'm looking at to learn the most is going to be Tennessee.
My answer for this one's going to sound a little strange at first, but I'm actually, it's going to be the same week as your pick, Bobby. I'm going with the Syracuse game at the Players Era event.
Okay.
And again, it's strange because Syracuse is definitely the lower rated of the two teams. And again, to be fair, most teams are not going to stack up very well against Tennessee's recent history. U of H is one of the very few that does. But this is only going to be the second Cougar game played away from Houston after that game that you mentioned, the quasi-road game against Auburn in Birmingham. To me, whether this team wins or loses against Auburn in that previous one, I'm still curious in either scenario how this team responds. Yes, technically you have a bye game against Rider in the middle of these two games, but that's not really what I'm going to be sweating here. If the Cougars are coming off a win off Auburn, you're curious how this team with some young key players handles that success their next time out on the road against an opponent who's remotely capable of challenging them. And I would be curious how this team responds to coming off a loss against Auburn. How does this team handle adversity? Because last year's team was freakishly good at responding to losses, as evidenced by them not losing in regulation from mid-November through early April. That's a tough act to follow. And I'm curious if in this opening game at one of the sports premier events that week, an event that I fully agree with you is going to be a lot like an NCAA postseason event with the amount of really good teams there, how the Cougs respond coming off a win or coming off a loss, either scenario there, I'm curious about. And Syracuse, granted, is coming off two pretty terrible seasons, but they have a promising signing class coming in. We'll certainly view playing U of H as a chance to prove that they're Syracuse's first good team post Jim Boeheim retiring. A little out of the box, I realize. I think you can make a lot more straightforward cases for the one that you said, Tennessee, for Arkansas, for Auburn, all good picks there. But I'm going with this one because, again, I'm curious how this team responds to either adversity or success, and I think that first game against Syracuse is going to be a critical spot there.
No, I think that's a great answer.
Our second question, and not that I'm not interested in all three of these, but the one I think I'm the most curious about your answer here specifically, which Big 12 matchup do you believe all of us in the Cougar fan base are maybe overlooking?
Sam, this might be an answer that you are kind of shocked by, unless you chose it too, in which case, great minds, buddy, great minds. But I think it's going to be the Big 12 opener in Cincinnati.
Sorry, we do laugh. That is the game I have.
Yes. Yes.
And we did not coordinate. We coordinated only on just like agreeing on these questions, but nothing else. Like the only thing we've coordinated on with this is we both kind of just like, okay, do we both believe we have the same lineup? We did, and we kind of structure our discussion that way. I do have the one. Sorry, give me your thoughts.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. The reason why I'm saying that is that Cincy team might be kind of good, but it's 3 days before you play Texas Tech. Feels like a prime letdown game. You're really excited. You're hosting Texas Tech. You're getting excited for that game. And not saying that I think Cincinnati is going to beat U of H in this game. I don't. I just want to be clear on that. I don't think Cincy's going to pull the upset, but it just kind of feels like one of those games where you come out and the Cougs just look a little flat. That'll sometimes happen in sports, right? You just come out and you're the better team, but you just don't play your best basketball. You come in with a B level kind of performance, and sometimes you just look a little flat. And I certainly I could see the Cougs coming out a little slow. I look at some of what Cincinnati did in the offseason. They bring in some size and just feel like they brought in one of the guys they brought in feels like a Cincinnati version of Wani. Jalen Haynes was a first teamer at George Mason. Just feels like if the Cougs get into some foul trouble, combine that with what I think will be a crazy atmosphere in 5th, 3rd, 1 and 2/3 arena. It could just be a problem for the Cougs.
Yeah, I'm low-key kind of worried about this game specifically. Saturday afternoon game, don't believe there are many realistic scenarios where they don't have a big crowd for this one. And they're starving to beat us, which is crazy to say because we just used to never beat them. Like in the early CUSA days, kind of before you and I became fans, U of H just had a terrible head-to-head against, because I mean, it was like Bob Huggins and a truly elite Cincinnati program. And then rejoining Cincy in the American just early on, their Mick Cronin teams, we just could not beat them either. Bobby, they haven't beaten us since before COVID. And
Which
even
is
by
insane. Like you
even
said,
by that
it's
game,
just
we had
insane
won
to
like
think.
3 of the last 4.
Mhm.
It was the game where where Deaky got a little up close and personal with that one guy's leg.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
But
right.
legit have not beaten us since that game. Gonna mention they have their first round level guy, it feels like in many years, in Sean Abayev, also their second highest rated recruit ever. I like the George Mason guy that you mentioned. Also a couple of big men, Mustafa Tiam, who played last season at UCF. If you may remember, he had a pretty good game against the Cougs the one time U of H and UCF met last season. Baba Miller, formerly of FAU and Florida State as well. I like what they have at guards. Don't love it, but good enough, in my opinion, this team to be minimum around a bubble team. And that level of opponent playing in front of what will be a raucous home crowd against an opponent that program and that fan base badly wants to beat. I mean, that's just how upsets happen, man. And the look ahead spot against Tech, like you said, didn't even consider that for mine, but I think a very important point there as well. Gun to my head, like you, I still think the Cougars win this one, but I have more heartburn about that one than I believe the average U of H fan does. I believe a lot of people just kind of see Tech on the schedule and don't see the game before that. Don't believe the team is, to be clear, but those of us in the fan base don't have a prerogative to take it one game at a time. It's easy to get ahead to that one and remember, oh yeah, like there's a really tough one right before that.
Right before it.
Last but not least, keeping the last question simple, what game on the schedule are you most excited about? It can be a Big 12 game, can be a non-conference game, though I would imagine you're going Big 12 game.
Yeah, I am going to go Big 12 game. And Sam, can I go a little bit selfish here? TCU. It's in Fort Worth. I don't necessarily think it'll be the greatest game that we'll ever watch. But last time I watched a men's basketball game in TCU, I had a great time, but the Cougs lost. And so, yeah, I chose the game that I'm going to be at. I actually really enjoy, I'm glad this is behind the paywall, because when I trash talk them and on Twitter here in a couple of weeks, I don't want them to know this, but it's probably my favorite non-U of H fan base in the Big 12. Every time I go there, no matter what sport, I have a great time. Their fans are always super nice and super engaging, and it's kind of funny. I do a good job. Me and their fans, we do a good job of talking smack to each other. We do a really good job of talking a lot of shit to each other at those games while keeping it respectable and not wanting to fight each other. I think they have something with their basketball team where it's like, oh, hey, if we don't sit down until one of the teams scores, I can't remember if it's TCU or U of H, and I think it's until U of H scores, and we went down and we scored on, they got the tip, they scored, we go down, we score right away, and I just remember screaming, all right, everybody, now we can sit down, enjoy the game, now that we're done with your little bit. And then they hit the shot to beat us, and they're celebrating, and I got guys like grabbing my head like, oh, we told you. It was like, even though your team loses, like those kind of atmospheres make it, like, I hate to say more fun, but you kind of walk away going, well, at least I had a good time at the game. So I enjoy going to TCU games quite a bit. And so selfishly, I'm going to enjoy going to that game.
This is a game I'm going to as well, though I think a little more straightforward. And I don't think anyone would take issue with why I picked them. The game I'm most excited about is Arizona's first trip to the Fertitta Center as a Big 12 member. I felt similarly about this game when it was in Tucson last year. It was, for me, a whoa moment to see Cougar men's basketball, as good as we've been for as many years now as we've been, playing at and then beating Arizona, one of the most iconic programs and venues in the sport. And maybe I'm biased as someone who started liking college basketball really as Arizona under Lute Olson was one of the iconic programs in the sport, the last team west of the Rockies to win a national title. Like, I know UCLA collectively has more history, but I don't believe there is any fan base in this part of the country that supports their men's basketball program, really both men's and women's basketball programs collectively, as well as the Arizona fans do as well. And if anything, my semi-reverence for that program has amplified my enjoyment that U of H has now won 3 in a row against the Wildcats. They're going to be a good top 25 team, maybe even top 10, top 15 with some key young players, not unlike what U of H has in this roster. I'm sure it'll be just a fantastic atmosphere at the Fertitta Center. I expect there'll be a decent amount of Cats fans there, but I think most of the crowd there very much supporting the Cougars. I have pretty rock solid plans to be physically present at this one with co-host emeritus Dustin. So very excited for this one for all those reasons.
Totally get it, 100%. I had the plan to go to that game last year, I believe, and just didn't work out.
Did shout out to my my now ex for for taking that ticket and being an actual good sport about that basketball game.
Yep.
Bobby, lead us into the kind of the polls and metrics talk. We did a little bit of this on our last regular pod, but I'm curious where you want to start here.
Like I said earlier, it's no longer surreal, but it doesn't feel weird being at the top. Like for a while, it was, oh my God, we are the top team. Like, this is crazy. We're the number 3 team in the country. We're the number 5 team in the country. I just remember going to games and you know, there were 100 people there. And it felt surreal, but now it just, you see it and you just see, oh, the Cougs are number 2. And I just go, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, that. Of course we are. Like, and again, it's not an expectation, but there's just no shock behind it anymore, and that's a weird feeling that I am trying to adjust to as a University of Houston basketball fan here. But it's just it's crazy to still think about it sometimes, though. But yeah, I don't get blown away like I did. But the advanced metrics have always liked the U of H game. Ken Palm has the Cougs as the number 1 team in the country by a pretty decent margin, actually. The difference between U of H and number 2 is the difference between like number 2 and number 6. So you're running a pretty.
That's pretty stark, yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's a pretty big jump. Like, and it's not that it's like, oh man, this team is so good. Like, it's just, I don't think we'll be that far ahead of everybody come the end of the year, but I think it says a lot. And you see the Cougs are ranked, I want to say number 6 in offense off the top of my head. I don't have it pulled up in front of me.
I'm looking at that because I had another point, but just because I'm staring at number 10 currently.
Number 10, that's right. So, and that's with
ho hum.
Yeah, and that's probably with some unknown variables of Sinek and Harwell in there. So you can think that offense can maybe even go higher. If you are for some reason not a Ken Palm guy, you want to go with another rating system, you can take a look at Torvik. They also have the Cougs at number 1. Elite defense with the offense coming in at number 15. A couple of things that really stood out to me looking at Torvik. You kind of look at the projected minutes of returning players, and if you look in the top 10, the Cougs are 4th in that metric. So again, that's projected minutes returning. That's pretty big when you really think about it, right? You are 4th in the top 10. You played at a national title game and 43% of your minutes are coming back. Like, yeah, I'll take that all day, every day. Then if for some reason you don't trust those metrics, you move over to the AP poll. The AP poll, which has always felt to me kind of like the vibes poll. Just what do we think this team is going to be? What do they return? Just without looking at the advanced metrics or anything like that. Just a true, what do I think of this? You get the Cougs coming in at number 2 behind Purdue, which is probably the number 1 team in returning minutes and returning production. So, going to be super interesting to watch the Cougs this year. You look at some of those early kind of reports and rankings, and it's hard not to get excited, man. What did you see when you saw some of the rankings? What kind of stood out to you?
I mean, just that a team that is going to have like a decent amount of freshman representation in the rotation. Still that a preseason metric like KenPom would like look at that and probably like, look at all the other things it does and still like, yeah, this is the number one team in the country. Yeah, this is the number one defensive team. I think that just it also tells you, I think, just with any computer system that this is, I think, why Purdue, with all the insane stuff they have on paper coming back, isn't higher. I mean, it's still number 3 in KenPom, still top 2 or 3 basically anywhere you would look, but Purdue just a very good defensive team, and you'd understand why a truly elite defense rebounding team year in year out like U of H would be something that the computers would like to be just like, hey, like it's one of those things. Obviously, being a great offensive team that returns nearly everyone, I can't remember if they lost anyone off that team, like Purdue, should get you like some preseason number 1 run, which, I mean, as we've seen, the human voters like Purdue a lot more than the computers do. You understand why. Like, hey, this really good offensive team with this really good point guard, and yes, this coach with a bad tournament record, but like I still think a very good, I think, body of work overall, like Matt Painter. You could understand why it's easy to talk yourself into that team. I'm excited to see what this Cougar team can do. I think compared to last year's team, obviously not very many weaknesses with last year's team. I wonder if maybe you're slightly worse at, scoring the ball inside, and a little bit slightly better, at scoring the ball inside, slightly worse at shooting from outside, and maybe you could have something comparable to last year's team doing like that. That was kind of something I picked up just looking at our little KenPom grid last year and all the various things this team was good and not good at, which obviously good at the majority of things, not so good at very few, but shooting inside there, that was just something I picked up there as well. I mean, it would be easy to come on here and just make some kind of very negative case against Purdue. I get why they've been voted one.
Me too.
And the preseason metric, I don't bear them any ill will at all. Like I think if I didn't have the Cougar biases, I might have the Cougs at number 2 here. Even as a big metrics guy, I still, if I didn't have the U of H bias, might just look at that Purdue team and be like, I'm sorry, with preseason ranking criteria, flawed as they are, preseason ranking criteria, I get why you have that team there. But I also wouldn't pick against the Cougs if we have a repeat of last year's Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You kind of look at it and go, yeah, I mean, I get why someone would vote Purdue with all that returning talent that they had. Just like last year, you could have made the argument that we could have been preseason AP number 1 just with all the returning talent we had. So, yeah, I think the biggest argument you could make against it is like, oh, hey, but U of H beat them last year, but that was last year. Most coaches will tell you we want to build on the previous year, but at the end of the day, that was a completely different team. That is not the same team that you saw. You didn't see the same team from year to year, and especially in the portal era. So, just to your point, very very interesting there.
This isn't a Big 12 preview, so I will not belabor this point, but I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was at least relevant to kind of this section here. 8 different Big 12 men's basketball teams, Bobby, in the top 36, of the overall rankings. 8 from Cincinnati at 36 to obviously the Cougs at 1. That you had 8 total teams in that group is pretty crazy. I know it's a preseason ranking, but I think that kind of gives you an indication. Like, not that last year's team didn't compete in a very good Big 12 conference, but this might be a slightly better league than it was last year. This year, and it speaks to how insane the standard is for Big 12 men's basketball, that last year's was kind of like by the conference standards, like not the most brutal in recent history. Still a really good fucking league. And I think last year's team pretty comfortably third best, or last year's league, pretty comfortably third best among all the Division I men's basketball conferences. I feel like you can make a push this year to kind of take it over from the Big Ten to be, I think, the second highest rated conference. Again, I think SEC, I'm not going to be a big homer for them here. That should be a very good league again this year, but I think this could be an even better version of Big 12 men's basketball than we saw last year.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the Big 12 this year very well could be the second best conference in America again.
Anything we missed in talking Cougar men's basketball, Bobby?
But we just talked for about 90 minutes. I think if we did miss something, then we apologize to our patrons. But yeah, we just talked it for $1.50. So yeah,
people are going to eventually listen to this that aren't our patrons. To be clear,
fair enough.
But you know what? They're sold. If they've made it 85 minutes into this, like
yeah, they're in.
You're a soldier. You're a great fan of the show.
Yep.
And of course, we have plenty to talk about with regards to the Cougar women's basketball program as well. A team right now, certainly not on the same level in their sport as the Cougar men are, but also a team with some real excitement behind it for the first time in a while, Bobby. Before I think we get to this season's team and coach, I won't belabor this point too much. I'm not going to blame external factors exclusively for what happened, but we'll just say one more time that your last head coach, Ron Huey, was a very good dude. You can't tell the story of his time at U of H without acknowledging that his program was never among the best supported by the athletic department, even during its days in the American. And any shortcomings there were certainly magnified with this move to the Big 12, which is an extremely good women's basketball conference, just like it is on the men's side. This wasn't the only Cougar athletic program to kind of take it on the chin as U of H transitioned to the Big 12, but it was clear when U of H brought Huey back for last season that we were on an inevitable crash course for being the Big 12's worst program last year and one of the worst in the country. One of the things that excited me most about U of H hiring Matthew Mitchell is that I don't believe a coach of Mitchell's resume, even with some years off, would come back to the college game to this specific job without assurances he'd have a bit more to work with than his predecessor did. And I just mentioned him, Bobby. Mitchell's a really exciting hire, isn't he?
Yeah, man, that is really the first kind of thought that I had when I sat down is you have to start with this hire. I think you and I think we even did a pod on it, talked about who do we think we will hire, and we threw out some names. I was like, Matthew Mitchell, that's not a guy. Where was he? And I just never even like processed it. And then a quick Google, and then you immediately get excited. One of the things that we kind of joke about, and co-host Emeritus Dustin has kind of said in the past that I think you and I agree with at times, is the other school upset or happy that he's gone, right? And that kind of tells you this is kind of what the fan base thought of him. Man, everyone at Kentucky was super excited for Coach Mitchell here about, hey, congrats on the new job. We're so sorry. Sad that we weren't able to that you aren't our coach, but we're super excited for you. Things like that. So we had Kentucky people telling us we got a good one. So that really tells me a lot. I think the other shocking thing about it is something you kind of mentioned. It seems like we're going to throw some serious money behind the women's basketball program. If there wasn't the financial aspect of it, I don't know if Matthew Mitchell comes here. And I think just hiring Matthew Mitchell shows how much money you are going to put into the program, because I don't think it was a inexpensive hire. We'll just say that.
Won over 68% of his games as head coach of Kentucky. Program set records for SEC single season wins, won its first conference regular season title since the early 1980s, went to 9 NCAA tournaments in his final 10 seasons there. Would have probably been 10 and 11 if there had been an NCAA tournament in 2020 as well. 5 trips to the tournament second weekend. And this isn't necessarily as important, but it was something you just mentioned. One of those things we found out quickly after his hire was just how beloved the guy was by the Kentucky fan base. He wasn't just a winning coach at Kentucky, though he very much fits that description, but he was a winning coach who was able to successfully engage that fan base and oversaw the most successful long-term run in that program's history to date. He's a builder. He's a guy who has deep connections in the women's college game and somebody very good at doing the public-facing things of the job, which is something U of H desperately needed for this hire. I mean, even 6 months later, I'm kind of in a state of pleasant surprise that we were able to pull Mitchell for this job, even acknowledging that he hasn't coached a game in college since 2020 when he had a serious head injury and ended up retiring from the job at Kentucky. And it's mostly done like public speaking, like training and motivation stuff since then. And I think, again, even acknowledging like there's some time off there, I don't doubt this guy was still very plugged into the college game. I also don't doubt that even with that long layoff, that if U of H hadn't given him an answer that was satisfactory in terms of like, hey, like feeling out what they were willing to put behind this program if he took the job, he could have found somewhere else in Division I and probably in a Power 4 conference as well that would have seriously considered, if not given him their women's basketball opening. I think he did very much want to get back into the college game. Obviously, the reason he's here and not at a high level SEC program like the one he built to Kentucky is that time off. But still think, like we've both now said multiple times, it was a very clear statement of intent from U of H that they at least, I wouldn't even say big support behind the program, putting at least some support behind the program and on this new head coach. And he's been as good as advertised in this early stage at all the public facing stuff, which I think is very exciting.
Yeah, I think the previous regime was also pretty good at that, but not nearly to the level that Coach Mitchell has been. So yeah, pretty excited for the hire. I think it is a big show of intent for the women's basketball program.
Yeah, I would just say about the predecessor, I think anyone who interacted with Huey, Cougar fan otherwise, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who had a bad impression of the exchange or a bad impression of him as a guy. I think just Mitchell is just another level there, and I think the credibility that comes with being the guy who ran a successful SEC program, I think something that you just can't get without that level of experience. There's only a finite number of people who have ever done that.
Yep.
So I figure we talk about who's back from last year's team first, because that is not a very long list, Bobby. As you would expect with a new staff coming in, frankly, you didn't have that many players who would have been able to return regardless. I mean, you can understand why the last staff wasn't building for 3 or 4 years down the road. This is almost an entirely new basketball team, but probably the most intriguing returner for me, Bobby, well, I'll kick this off this way, is someone who actually didn't play at all last season. Guard Kateri Poole, who ended up missing all of last season with what I believe, a torn ACL, but at the very least, some kind of lower body season-ending injury. Poole was a 5-star recruit out of high school, started games both of her seasons at Ohio State, was on the 2021 Big Ten all-freshman team. After that, Poole had a season and change at LSU, where she started in LSU's final 5 games en route to winning the 2023 national title after mostly being a bench player on that Tigers team during the regular season. Early in the following season, Poole was dismissed from the team at LSU for issues that weren't legal in nature, was slated to play at U of H last season before missing all of that season due to injury. Certainly a wild card, exactly what Poole can give you off of 2 seasons of mostly not playing basketball, but anytime you could bring in a player with the high level experience that Poole has, you have to take it. And I was pleased when we didn't see any news of Poole leaving the program after the Mitchell hire. I saw she walked to graduation last spring as well. So she also now joins you and me in the illustrious club of U of H bachelor degree holders, Bobby.
Yes, sir. Very excited about that. No, I think, like you said, that's going to be your biggest keep on this roster. I think that is, if you were trying to keep one person, I think Kateri Poole was one that you really wanted to keep. I think also keeping Summer Bostock is kind of an interesting one there as well. She didn't play a ton last year, but she made 28 appearances, 1 start. I think having her is going to keep some of the depth that you can oftentimes lose when you bring in a new kind of coaching staff and a almost brand new roster like you are seeing. Sometimes you need to keep some of the old roster, even if they aren't going to play a ton for you, just for that depth piece and to make sure that they are that you're going to be able to have the players that you need with injuries and things like that.
I did hesitate a bit when I said Poole is my most intriguing returning player, because I like Kiera Merchant a lot, and she's back for her junior season after starting most of last season. Was your leading scorer, had 20 points in your lone Big 12 win last year over Oklahoma State. Tough player, despite being one of the smaller players in the court, more often than not someone I've seen ever hesitate to do the hard work on rebounding or playing defense. I would say she's more of a slasher than a perimeter shooter, but she wasn't a bad shooter from deep last season. Wasn't a great shooter from deep last season, but wasn't bad despite being asked to do it a lot more than she did 2 years ago as a freshman. If Merchant improves again as a shooter, keeps doing the dirty work, I think she'll be a really valuable player on this team. Was one of the representatives with the Cougs at Media Day with Matthew Mitchell for the Big 12 as well. I believe she was the only returnee out of that group. I want to say it was her, TK Pitts, and Amani Bartlett, but could be wrong and not a super important detail.
Right. That sounds right to me.
But feels like someone who's now was one of the few freshmen the last staff recruited later on in their time here, and is now local player as well. Stayed on with the new staff, and I'd really like to see a staff more capable of unlocking the things I've seen in flashes from Kiera Merchant.
Yeah, I think she's going to be a massive contributor this year as well. Anytime the new staff brings in a bunch of new players and they want to send you to media days, that really says a lot about what they think of you and your leadership.
So outside of the three players that Bobby and I just talked about, as we've said at least a couple times now, this is almost an entirely new roster, mostly populated by veteran transfers. Long-term, you would, of course, want to see the staff recruit and develop from the high school ranks, and good news, the staff has already been very much doing that in the 2026 class. You just had 4-star forward Madison Carlton from Seven Lakes High in Katy commit to the program. Tamaya King, forward from Austin Westlake as well. So long-term, Mitchell and the staff are building the way you would want to see this team built. But, I mean, if a staff comes in April around when this one did, you're not going to be able to build a roster mostly of incoming freshmen. Everyone's committed by this point, not to mention the struggles you would have trying to be competitive with a roster of mostly 18 to 19-year-olds who weren't elite recruits. And frankly, even if you did have elite recruits, you'd probably struggle to compete with a roster of that mostly type of player in the women's game. I'll be curious how much we see this season from the three freshmen the staff brought in. Kayla King, who's a guard from San Antonio, Jade Jones from South Florida, and then Gemma Hunter, an international prospect from Queensland, Australia. I would expect at minimum this season, a vast majority of your minutes are going to be played by players who joined this program prior to the season as transfers from other D1 institutions. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard not to have that assessment when you look at just the roster in and of itself.
And to me, the transfers all seem to fit two general descriptions. You feel free to cut in if you think I'm missing something or incorrect there. Either a player from a smaller conference team, looking for a chance to play a similar role for Big 12 level team like U of H, or a bench role player from a power conference program, maybe looking for a chance to play a bigger role at kind of the end of their college career. Would you say that's kind of an accurate general description?
I think that's fair.
And that's not me, to be clear, taking any shot at this roster. U of H isn't in a position right now to attract the top transfer portal recruits. This is a first-year staff, and also the best of the best mid-major conference transfers are going to probably get scooped up by programs that are right now more proven commodities in the women's game than U of H, even with the cachet that it's clear the Mitchell staff has. There are still a lot of intriguing players in this group. For me, I think none more so than TK Pitts. TK Pitts was third in the ACC, which is a really good women's basketball conference. Played at SMU last season, was third in the ACC in steals per game. Seems like an upgrade defensively, Pitts is, over any player who was on the court for the Cougs last season. There are a number of transfers I'm excited about, but none definitively more so for me, Bobby, than Pitts.
Yeah, that is she's kind of the big standout for me as well. Average 6.3 a game with that really tough ACC schedule, like you had mentioned. Also kind of a defensive nuisance. Average 2.3 steals per game. So I think with her coming in, it's going to be very interesting to see kind of going forward.
Like Kendall Hunter as well. Was a top 25 recruit in the 21 class several years ago, was the Chronicles co-player of the year for the entire Houston area girls basketball as a senior, but for a lot of her college career has struggled to stay healthy, was finally a regular bench player last season for not that good A&M team in the SEC. She finally has a chance this season, potentially be a lead guard on a power conference program. And if healthy, back in her hometown, show some of the promise that made her such an elite recruit. Brianna Peguero is one of those players I mentioned transferring up earlier, was a super consistent scorer at Troy last season, was great for them in the postseason, the WNIT last year, where she was an all-tournament player, was a JUCO All-American early in her career as well. She played ball at Jersey Village back in her hometown. I think would be someone who's also a good candidate, despite playing against a higher level competition than she's played in her career previously, to have a good final season in college. Also, someone with a little bit more eligibility, Shantaria Anumele comes back to Houston. I believe she's from the Sugar Land area originally. She averaged 9 points a game last season as a freshman at St. Louis, maybe going to a slightly higher level competition here, but somebody who I think took to the college game pretty quickly, which is for me always a green flag with college prospects. Like, is the A-10 as good as the Big 12? No. There is still a massive gulf between Texas girls high school basketball or the AAU circuit for D1 level girls basketball players and what she saw on a game in, game out basis playing for an A-10 program. So that even acknowledging the step up in competition that Anumele is about to get here, that Peguero is about to get here, I still think having that college experience, and in Anumele's case specifically, really taking to the college game this quickly, I think can only be a positive for what they could possibly give you this season.
Yeah, for me, Peguero, I'm a massive fan of the transfer. You saw her become an all women's NIT tournament team type of player. There's something to be said about that experience. You know, would you love to see that it's NCAA tournament experience? Yeah, sure. But we are at a place where you want to compete in a women's NIT. Just get to a women's NIT. And I think having that kind of experience on your roster, that kind of player has a different belief. Isn't what I wanted to say. What is I
think belief actually works though for what what you're saying.
But I think more of the expectations of what you are going to do day in, day out, and what it takes to make it to the NIT, make it to a championship game at an NIT, and get the job done.
Probably helps also. I mean, if Peguero gets Troy to the NCAA tournament, obviously it's something you mentioned. Obviously it's something very cool for her to be in that. But I mean, for a level of program like Troy, it's probably going to be a one and done experience to go to the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. You go to the WNIT, still good level of basketball, more capable of making a deep run. And now Peguero comes to University of Houston with this, I think, high volume of postseason experience from that time of the tournament. I mean, so we've just talked about 4 guards here. We also mentioned 2 other guards that I think we expect to play a decent sized role this coming season in Kateri Poole and Kiara Merchant. I don't need much imagination, Bobby, to see this being a solid and reasonably deep guard group that don't think it's a stretch to say upgrade over last season's guard group, even acknowledging that you graduated a program mainstay and one of your better players in recent history in Layla Blair.
I agree.
Because I expect you're going to be starting at minimum 3 guards, and there are a number of combinations of the 6 players that we've talked about some amount here that I'd be comfortable with. I have more questions about the front court of this team. Do you think that it's fair to say that's a less proven group, and you don't have as easy of a time talking yourself into U of H maybe matching up with some of the teams with real skilled size? That's maybe my biggest piece of heartburn when it comes to this year's team.
I think that's very fair to say.
Which isn't me saying that there aren't still intriguing forwards on this roster. It may be collectively that group doesn't have as much of a body of work as all the guards we talked about. Amani Bartlett, former highly recruited Houston area prep player, played 65 games in the last 3 seasons for a very, very good LSU program, but didn't get a ton of total minutes in those 65 games. Obviously, you would imagine someone who plays more here at U of H, and like her teammate Kendall Hunter was a really elite 2021 recruit, but not really super proven in the college game yet. Jordan Ross is another former Houston area high school player. She played at Summer Creek, who's coming home, was a WCC all freshman team selection 2 seasons ago, but didn't feature that much last season in Arizona. Amira Abdur-Rahim, youngest sister of 90s NBA guy Sharif Abdur-Rahim, comes to play her senior season at U of H, played last year at A&M, played previously for SMU and Notre Dame. 2 seasons ago in SMU's last AAC season, she actually led the American in blocked shots and then averaged a pretty solid 11 points and 6 boards per game there. I would say she's probably the safest bet of this trio to be the game 1 starter at center if she's healthy, which I think is pretty exciting. And I could talk myself into those 3 front court players to differing degrees, but that's about it in terms of players who have college experience here. And even acknowledging it's fewer possible positions. I mean, you see, okay, we have like 3 players who have some proven college experience, but none of them have been really difference makers at the Big 12 level. You almost start like looking at that and say, hey, do we start 4 guards potentially?
Yeah, that's certainly a thing you could do. I think you are right in the sense that there is some concern with what you are going to see with the bigs here. But I think with a new coaching staff and a new roster, there's a lot of question marks about this team. I know I picked them as my hot take on the year that they were going to be on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. I still think that is a distinct possibility. That makes it a hot take that we're going to probably at least make an NIT this year. I think you are right. You could see a 4-guard lineup. So it's going to come down to does Coach Mitchell play a system he wants to play, players be damned, or does he come up with a new system or take some ideas while he's kind of been sitting out about how he wants this, how he's going to change his philosophy to this roster?
Yeah, the more I look at this roster and kind of read Mitchell's preseason and offseason comments, has said stuff about wanting to be a team that plays swarming defense, has been pressing and pace. The more it actually talks me into that 4-guard lineup, because that's the kind of thing you say, like the swarming defense and pace, you say when you're going to be pretty guard centric. And that's something I'm not saying every team of his at Kentucky's done this, but I know it's something he's done in the past previously. My wild guess of the starting lineup, if you'll allow me, Bobby.
Yeah, hit me.
I think Brianna Peguero is going to be your point guard. I know she wasn't a pure point at Troy, but that was some of the early talk with Matthew Mitchell around her signing, was her potentially playing that kind of role. And I think you also see TK Pitts and Kendall Hunter alongside her guard. And then kind of the wild card 4th starting spot for me, as I've kind of talked myself in this 4-guard lineup, I believe you could see either Kateri Poole or Kiara Merchant being the starter here. I think gun to my head, it's Kiara Merchant, just because I think you're just trying at this point to get Kateri Poole back to basketball shape. I think it just getting used to getting reps with these teammates and just playing a college basketball game for the first time since the 2024 NCAA tournament. I think she had a few appearances for LSU, but they were pretty brief ones before she was dismissed from the team there. And then Amira Abdur-Rahim, I think you're starting center in this 4-guard situation.
Yeah, I in the 4-guard situation, I kind of agree with you there, and I think that's probably what you are going to be looking at. It wouldn't surprise me.
And yeah, maybe you see 2-big lineup with Ross or Bartlett and Abdur-Rahim.
Exactly. I was looking at the kind of Bartlett play there.
So any further thoughts on the roster lineup before we talk a little bit about the schedule to come?
No, man, let's get into it.
So the Cougar women will be opening their season one day after the men on Tuesday, November 4th at the Fertitta Center against UT Arlington, a team we have seen very regularly in non-conference play over these past 7 or 8 years of the Cougar women's basketball program. A team that pretty consistently in the recent years got the better of the Cougs in those matchups. To me, right out of the gate, not that it's a must to beat this team. I believe I have pretty modest expectations in year one for Matthew Mitchell here. But if you're able to beat this opponent, an opponent who specifically gave some recent Cougar teams problems, that would be a very nice opening win for this head coach staff. That would be a very early statement of intent. You also have early tests against UTSA and Rice, who are good enough teams, in my opinion, to give you a good idea early on in the season where this team is at as this new staff kind of figures out what they have in this new roster. If you can even go 2-1 against that stretch of teams that UTA, UTSA, and then Rice, not that guarantees anything early, or excuse me, anything beyond just being decent early and certainly not later in the season of the Big 12, it still might tell us a bit earlier than we expected how much Matthew Mitchell is cooking here in year one. I don't think there's anything in year one that's going to really sour us on the program long term. I think you and I both have very reasonable expectations. Even if your hot take was this team doing a bit better than the modest pick of, this team was 15th out of 16 in the Big 12 preseason. Nothing this season, even with your higher expectations than mine, is going to sour us long term. But no. When I kind of looked at the schedule, I was sort of curious to kind of when I saw those three games, I was like, okay, like we're gonna learn something one way or the other about this team and how ready they are in year one to do something under Matthew Mitchell that I haven't really seen the last few seasons.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that analysis of those kind of the opening games is really going to kind of tell us how you're cooking there. I would even extend it out to the SFA and UTRGV games. These are games that I would say sadly you've struggled with in the past, right? You look back at last year, there were some absolute head scratchers in games that you dropped and games that you didn't expect. That if you can kind of start those games, I mean, heck, you lost to UTRGV last year. You lost to Rice by 12. If you are winning those games, you lost to UT Arlington, like you said. It's really going to tell you. It feels a lot like soccer this year, where you kind of come out and you cook a little bit early on, and you're like, oh, there's something going on here. I kind of like this, but I don't want to get too excited. And you kind of feel like if in those first 5 games, if you go 3-2, 4-1, that is a massive improvement over what you saw against this level of competition last year, including a lot of those teams.
Yeah, I didn't include SFA because quite honestly, SFA viewed as a program in a mid-major conference as compared to the Cougars. Even when the Cougars were in the American, the Cougars were in a better conference, but they were such a better team than you when Kellogg was there. And Kellogg is now at West Virginia, as you do when you're a good mid-major coach. You eventually get hired by a more serious power conference team. Haven't been as good in recent memory. They did go to the NCAA tournament last year by virtue of winning the Southland tournament, but less of an absurdly good mid-major program under their new head coach as compared to Mark Kellogg previously. So that one might be a good benchmark for the Cougs as well. I don't have as many specific expectations for the matchups in Big 12 play. I think probably the most likely teams for you to pick off are, you get Cincinnati at home, but they have, I'm not going to dive into the Big 12 teams as much on the women's side, but they have, I think, their biggest recruiting program history in there as well. Texas Tech hasn't been a very good women's basketball program, but damn, they have had our number specifically these last few seasons. Was one of those like, man, they're not very good at this sport, and they're just so head and shoulders better than the last two teams. That might be an interesting test there as well. I don't think they're expected to be great this season. If you could actually compete with this team that hasn't been very good in Big 12 play for the first time ever, that might be a nice little statement that you're doing better under this head coach. And obviously the programs that, you get kind of a nice one in UCF in the regular season finale at home, the one team that was picked below you. And I think a team with maybe not as rosy vibes around them, with I think being picked dead last and having a third year head coach. I saw their coach just randomly. It wasn't even like someone I follow. It was just like on our For You page. Like their coach was just like, have some grace for coaches because it's a lot tougher in the portal. And it's like, I don't actually in the abstract disagree with that statement as much, but ma'am, you cannot You cannot say that when you've won like 3 conference games in your first 2 seasons. Nobody who's paying attention to your program, which is probably a lot smaller number than it was before you got there, wants to hear that.
Right. Exactly.
So that might be a good chance to end the regular season on a high note. Obviously, everyone qualifies for the Big 12 tournament, so you'll still at least have some after that. If I had any one wish list, it was like Arizona State, one of the other teams that wasn't very good last year and made a new hire. They hired the Grand Canyon coach. I wish we were getting them at home. You're only getting them in Tempe, which I think is going to be tougher. That's maybe one you would have wanted 2 of. But I mean, again, I think for me, I don't have a whole ton of very specific expectations for this season. Just want to see the Cougars be more competitive against some of the more low-hanging fruit in terms of opponents, and keep doing the off-the-court things in terms of like roster building and high school stuff going forward.
Yeah, and to be honest, we are still seeing that, right? Like we kind of talk about how that's what you want to see in the recruiting and recruits. While there's not a ton of information out there, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like, oh yeah, you can just look up this, you can just look this up and you'll be able to easily tell which recruits are top 100 and blah blah blah, right? Like
it's better than it used to be, but
yeah,
it's not nearly as robust as the men.
Yeah, and you still have people who know women's basketball better than we do. That is very much like, hey, they're getting excited about the things that they're seeing from this program as well.
No doubt. All right, we've talked for 2 hours, Bobby. I think we've done a good doggone job previewing the 2 Cougar basketball seasons to come. Take us home, buddy.
All right, well, since this is going out to everyone, I don't know if I should do a regular outro or our Patreon one. I'm going to do the normal one. So if you have any feedback for us, please reach out to us. You can find us on social media. Twitter is going to be at SH Podcast. If you are on Blue Sky, you can find us over there on podcast.social. Wow, I've said it so many times. Podcast.bsky.social.
This is the only time I think you've not hit.
Yeah,
hit this.
yeah.
I'll give you a pass because it's been 2 hours.
It's been 2 hours of talking into a microphone. No, but you can find us there. If you want to reach out to us via email, you can find us at SH Podcast. That's PAWDCAST at gmail.com. We thank you guys so much for listening. If you wanted to hear this 2 weeks before you are currently hearing it, if it is on the normal feed is where you're listening to it, you could have gotten this via $5 a month. You could have really spaced it out and gotten this early and engaged in some conversation with us about what you think about the University of Houston's upcoming basketball team. So find us on Patreon, patreon.com/SHpodcast. And Sam, I think that's it. And we have like 2 weeks until basketball season, bud. What do we always say?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!